Welcome back, everyone. Now that we've done some tech shenanigans, let's get back into some composition shenanigans. As usual, MIDI and sheet music of this will be on Buy Me a Coffee. I've also added a bunch of other stuff in case you've missed it. I'll put the link in the description. Anyway, today I want to talk about one of many techniques to make your chord progressions sound more interesting and to give your music more directional flow. It's a very old counterpoint technique called prepared dissonances. It came about in like mid-Renaissance, so around 1450, 1500, so a really long time ago. Back then, this was a rule, which is obviously obsolete now in modern music, but I still like to use this technique very often because there's just something very satisfying about it, and it just really sounds lovely. And it's just so simple that everybody can use it without even knowing counterpoint. So the original idea here was that you couldn't just randomly have dissonant intervals, like seconds or sevenths, out of nowhere. They had to be first directly introduced in a consonant context. So in our understanding today, this would be root, third, fifth, before they could be used in dissonant context. So let me show you this in the example.
So this would be a correct way of doing it. You have this note in an A minor chord, that is the C, so it's the third consonant context, and then the C is sustained into the next chord while the other notes change into a different chord, in this case G. But so this turns into a dissonance that then needs to resolve. It sounds like this. Right? You hear this kind of thing in classical music all the time. But so this is the correct counterpoint way, Renaissance Baroque counterpoint way of doing it. Here's another example from a different chord. So we got F major. Again, I'm sustaining the C into the G, and then it resolves. But first, it's introduced here in a consonant context. It's the fifth of the chord. Right? Exactly the way you hear it all the time in Baroque music and Renaissance music. Now, this would be fine in modern music right here, but, you know, according to this rule, this would be a no-no. This is a D minor chord, which does not have the C in it, and so it's jumping into this dissonance right here, into this sus4, I guess it is. Which, again, in modern music, you can totally do that. I do it all the time. But by the original rule, you couldn't do that. Right? So this is the whole concept. The sustained note turns into a dissonance. The other notes change into... It turns into a dissonance because the other notes change into the next chord while the original gets sustained and then has to resolve. Works best if it resolves by a second as well. But again, you don't have to. It's like, you know, we're in the 21st century. We can do whatever we want. This whole technique, the nice thing about it is that it gives the music more direction, right? Because of that dissonance that has this tendency to resolve somewhere, it gives a chord progression kind of a more directional flow, because you have these strong tendencies to go somewhere. Now, obviously, the question here is, what's a useful way to apply this in today's time and test this out in our own chord progressions? How is this useful today? And here's how I do it and how you can do it at all times. Super, super simple. Trust me. So I prepared a couple of just string ensemble chord patches, just, you know, for the example. So here's the chord progression. I put the chord symbols up there as well. So let's assume this is the chord progression I've settled on, right? I have my melody going on top or whatever, and these are the chords. And now I want to spice up this chord progression and give it more direction. So let's listen to the original first, and then I show you what I do. Right? Never mind the mock-up. It's just, for demonstration purposes. So what you can do now to spice it up, this is same chord progression. We're going to use the same over and over. In order to use this prepared dissonance technique, you go into the top line first and extend the top line by a beat, and then draw this back. So now automatically these are prepared dissonances. You sustain the previous note while the rest of the chord changes, and then you resolve it. Let's listen to it. Makes it very tragic. I'm getting some adagio for strings vibes as well. So this would be the way to do it with the top line extended. All of these chords also have names, sus4, sus whatever, sus9. It doesn't matter. You don't have to label them. I certainly, while I'm doing this, I'm not out here thinking, I wonder what this chord is called. Like, no, just... It's not practical to think in music theory necessarily while you're writing. So this is, again, the original chord progression. Top line is back to what it was. Now let's do the same thing with the middle line of the chord. Boom, extend it, and pull this back. Now the middle line is playing the susses. Way more interesting chord progression than it was before, and way more directional. Now, of course, you can do that also with the third line. Let's do that. Here we go. Same principle. You take the bottom line here, extend it, shorten it. There. Now, this is the line that is playing the susses. Let's listen to it. Such a simple trick to make something generic more interesting. Is this the end-all be-all? Probably not. I don't know. It's a simple way to make something more interesting and give it more directional flow. And now obviously you could mix and match whichever susses you liked. You can also do two at the same time. Like, this is kind of where you play around with it and just choose the ones you like, and also the ones that would work best with whatever melody you got going on, if there is a melody. But this is how I like to use classical theory that is outdated, obviously, but how to use it in modern music. And this is always why I tell people it's useful to know classical techniques, even though they're not rules anymore. It's good to know them because then you have these little tricks in your treasure chest and can use them when you're on a project and you want to try something out, or you're looking for some specific sound. It's just one more thing to know that you can do. Do you have to do it this way? Of course not. It's the 21st century, but this is always where I say theory comes in handy, but you have to change it and adapt it to be useful in this day and age, obviously. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say for today. Great way to spice up your chord progressions. I hope this was helpful, and